Next, on Currents News, praying to end racism. A mass is held at the co-cathedral of St. Joseph in Prospect Heights on the feast of St. Peter Claver.
So we know the pandemic has been changing the way kids go to college, but now for some students, it's changing what they go for. I'm Emily Drubian, that's ahead.
A monsignor tests positive for COVID. Now parishioners are urged to quarantine and get tested. Plus, how the Catholic Church is helping evacuees from the wildfires out west. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Following a summer of anti-racism protests and riots, bishops across the nation and right here in the Brooklyn Diocese preached against racism on the feast of St. Peter Claver. Currents News' Jessica Easthope attended the Mass at the co-cathedral of St. Joseph in Prospect Heights and has more.
We are dying, and our cries have gone unheard until today.
In his homily at the Mass for Racial Justice and Solidarity, Father Alonzo Cox spoke of how the church is working to overcome America's original sin, racism.
There's so much more that unites us than divides us, and we pray today for all of us to come together as a body.
Oh God, who made St. Peter Claver a slave of slaves.
The Wednesday night Mass at the co-cathedral of St. Joseph was held on the feast day of St. Peter Claver. He was known as the slave of the slaves for his ministry to Africans during the slave trade in Colombia. He baptized more than 300,000 people and is remembered for his vision of unity.
He was known for his humility, his simplicity, his spirit of sharing, and his devotion.
Auxiliary Bishop Neil Tiedemann celebrated the Mass. He says every Catholic can take the first step in bridging the racial divide by looking inward.
Where have I been racist in my attitudes and in my thoughts and the way that I judge others? So at this particular time, I think that's important.
Those who attended the Mass say they're turning to God and the Church for guidance on how to navigate the racial unrest of our day.
We think it's important to hear what the Church has to say about racism and what the Church plans to do about it.
This year has just brought so much chaos, so much turmoil. I still continue to lean on my faith and to lean on the Church, but also I'm hoping to be able to see more of what the Church can do for myself and for my fellow brothers and sisters.
Father Cox urged the only way out of the darkness of racism is to turn to Jesus, the light of the world. In Prospect Heights, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
That celebration didn't just take place in Brooklyn. Bishops across the United States observed St. Peter Claver's feast day, preaching on overcoming the sin of racism through God's grace. The chair of the U.S. Bishops' Anti-Racism Committee called for Catholics to pray and fast in reparation. But that's not all. Another top prelate, Archbishop Wilton Gregory of Washington, D.C., the first African-American Archbishop of the Archdiocese, preached at a Mass that the readings included warnings, but warnings that are life-saving, saying it is a warning of the dangers of hatred, neglect, and hard-heartedness toward others. St. Peter Claver, help us to see Christ in one another. Parishioners at a Bronx church are being told to self-quarantine and get tested after a monsignor contracted COVID-19. Monsignor John Graham of St. Francis de Chantal in the Throgsneck section tested positive for coronavirus. He said masses on September 3rd and September 5th and 6th. The Monsignor issued a statement telling parishioners that anyone who attended Mass and was within 6 feet of him for longer than 10 minutes should be tested and must quarantine for 14 days. Something remarkable and very positive is coming to light during the pandemic. The number of young people who are inspired by nurses are applying to nursing schools in record numbers. Currents News' Emily Druby has the story from St. Francis College in Brooklyn Heights.
Nurses, they've been on the front lines of the pandemic. Their fight has inspired patients, donations, even applause. Now, Their fight is inspiring students.
We've seen incredible growth in the number of applicants to our nursing program.
St. Francis College went from 450 nursing applications last year to 850 this year. The school's director of recruitment, Robert Oliva, says seeing healthcare workers during the pandemic had a strong influence on many students.
I think there are more and more people who really want to make a difference in the world.
Nalini Rangalam is one of them.
Helping people is kind of like my calling.
The freshman nursing student has always wanted to help people. The pandemic solidified that.
I've seen how it's affected like my family personally with Corona, other families. It's very devastating.
Same for incoming freshman Francesca Parisi.
The fact that people are out there right now helping others in such a hard time honestly motivates me even more.
Parisi is also inspired by her mother, who works in the medical field. She always wanted to go to nursing school, but was unable to. It's not just St. Francis College. Nursing schools across the country have noticed the uptick. Oliva said their school has a top-notch nursing program, complete with these fully equipped nursing labs. They even have cameras in the ceiling so that they can watch back what they did, critique it, and get better next time.
I was like, wow, like this is where I'm going to learn which type of nursing I want to do. The fact that they have all this like advanced technology to learn that, I think is amazing.
The influx of applications is a small silver lining in a very dark year. More people inspired to help others, which isn't just an essential part of being a nurse, it's an essential part of being Catholic. In Brooklyn Heights, Emily Druby, Currents News.
The stimulus stalls in the Senate. The Republican bill that would address some of the economic impacts from the pandemic failed to advance.
Are there any other senators wishing to vote or change their vote?
This comes 4 months after House Democrats passed their $3 trillion plan. The Senate version was narrower and would have cost about a tenth of the House proposal. It would have provided $300 in extra weekly unemployment benefits, but it did not include another stimulus check for individuals. The vote was 52 to 47. Earlier this year, Congress passed legislation providing more than $2 trillion in response to the pandemic. New unemployment numbers out today show they held steady last week. The Labor Department says 884,000 people filed claims. The number of people collecting unemployment has remained at historically high levels in recent weeks. That's a sign the labor market recovery is losing steam. Claims fell steadily for weeks after hitting a peak of about 7 million in March, but that pace has slowed and claims remain above pre-pandemic levels. President Trump admitting to downplaying the coronavirus. But while his critics are attacking him for it, he says he had good reason. New audio recordings of President Donald Trump putting the early days of the coronavirus response into the spotlight. Speaking to journalist Bob Woodward for a book set to be released next week, the president in February appeared to acknowledge the threat of the coronavirus.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
During that same time in public, the president said the disease was very much under control and cases would disappear. As of Wednesday, the U.S. has over 6.3 million known cases of COVID-19. The president also told Woodward this in March.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
It's just another political hit job. But whether it was Woodward or anybody else, you cannot show a sense of panic, or you're going to have bigger problems than you ever had before.
Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden went right after President Trump.
He knew how dangerous it was. And while this deadly disease ripped through our nation, he failed to do his job on purpose.
The president defended his remarks in an exclusive phone interview on Fox News last night.
What I want to show is I want to show a calmness. I'm the leader of the country. I can't be jumping up and down and scaring people. I don't want to scare people. I want people not to panic. And that's exactly what I did.
President Trump says he thinks his administration has done an incredible job when it comes to the virus response. President Trump told America his picks for a Supreme Court justice should a future vacancy ever open up. The commander-in-chief releasing 20 names to add on to his previous list that he made in 2016 and 2017. Among some of the candidates chosen by the president, some conservative Republican senators, the current ambassador to Mexico, and the Trump administration's top Supreme Court lawyer. President Trump also showed his support for Catholic priests serving in the U.S. Navy. The president tweeting against a recent decision to suspend contracts for Catholic priests in Southern California in an effort to cut costs, saying this will no longer be a point of discussion. He tagged New York's Cardinal Timothy Dolan in the tweet. The Navy ended up reversing that decision. 19 years later, 9/11 is still taking lives. 27 more brave souls have been added to the FDNY's memorial wall. The former firefighters passing away this year from illnesses related to their rescue and recovery efforts at the World Trade Center. FDNY chaplain and Brooklyn priest Monsignor John DeLendick helped read out the names during a private ceremony at the department's Brooklyn headquarters. To date, more than 226 members of the FDNY have passed away from 9/11 related illnesses. This year's ceremony for the 19th anniversary of 9/11 will look different because of the coronavirus pandemic, which almost canceled the tribute in light that has now been restored. But there will be dueling ceremonies, one at the 9/11 Memorial Plaza, the other at a corner near the World Trade Center. This comes after it was decided to use a recording of the reading of the victims' names. Vice President Mike Pence is expected at both ceremonies. Meanwhile, President Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden will attend a ceremony at the Flight 93 Memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And be sure to tune into Currents News tomorrow for our special coverage of the 19th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. We're taking a look at 9/11 first responders and why they could be more vulnerable to COVID-19. There's a lot more news headed your way. Sentenced to death. That's what a Christian man in Pakistan is facing, accused of blasphemy. We'll explore why Christians are increasingly coming under attack there. Where will thousands of migrants sleep tonight? The urgent plan to find a safe place for now refugees on the island of Lesbos. And out west, where flames are forcing people to flee from their homes, the Catholic Church is offering shelter to thousands.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
A Christian man has been sentenced to death for breaking Pakistan's blasphemy law. Courts there ruling that a factory worker will be hanged after his supervisor accused him of defamatory text messages against the Muslim prophet Muhammad. His lawyer says the defendant will be appealing that decision. Asia Bibi, a Catholic woman who spent almost a decade on death row after she was falsely accused for blasphemy, is calling for the law to be changed. Pakistan's Christians, like other religious minorities in the country, have been the target of escalating attacks in recent years. William Shahzad, the chairman of the Pakistani Christian Association of USA, knows their plight well. He lived there before moving to New York. He joins us now by phone. And William, can you tell us as much as you can about Pakistan's blasphemy laws? As a Christian, what can't you say?
Current issue right now, we have almost more than 25 people is in the jail like the last 10 years. And I request to Pakistan, the Prime Minister and the Pakistan Justice to please do something better. It's no justice, no right over there. You're going to say something. Right away, few groups together, they try to kill you, if not, and they put you in the jail. They call the police took you, and you can in the jail like almost 10 years, 15 years, like Asia Bibi, one of the big case in Pakistan, and she moved to Canada now.
Yeah, now these accusations of blasphemy have often led to violence. Just to take a look back on some recent attacks, in 2013, a suicide bomb attack on a church in Peshawar killed 80. In 2015, 2 bomb blasts at churches in Lahore killed 14. In 2016, a suicide attack on Easter killed 70. And in 2017, an attack on a church killed 9. So as a Christian living in Pakistan, are you always on high alert?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. In the especially in the big city, we don't have any big problem. But especially in the village, you never know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. And happen. You never know is what can happen is going to come.
Right. William Shahzad, the chairman of the Pakistani Christian Association of the U.S. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. And have a blessing day.
A massive fire took hold of a port in Beirut. The Lebanese army said the flames erupted at a warehouse storing oils and tires. Firefighters on the scene there reporting the fire has been brought under control but has not yet been extinguished. The blaze comes just weeks after a massive blast laid waste to the capital city, killing nearly 200 people. Tonight, there is an urgent need to help thousands of displaced migrants in Greece find a place to live. Fire forced them from a refugee camp on the island of Lesbos. Melissa Bell has more on a plan to find them safe haven.
They found refuge among the dead. Dozens of families who fled the fire in the Moria camp now living in this cemetery. Among them, 15-year-old Mariam and her sister Matab, who took videos as they ran.
I went to their house and everybody was run, and we take the police papers, Osweiss, and we run too. But we lost everything, like clothes and medicine, my medicines, mother.
An estimated 13,000 people had been living in Moria. Those who knew the camp say conditions inside were appalling.
I was here in 2018 as well to 2019, and I thought at that time that it couldn't really get much worse. I'm here now in 2020 and I was wrong. It's worse, and we're talking about children who've potentially never known anything but war, and now their futures are once again being ripped away from them.
For now, it is their very immediate future that is of most concern. In Moria, they had food and water. Here in the cemetery, they have nothing at all.
That was Melissa Bell reporting from Lesbos. Pope Francis visited there in 2016. He met with refugees and held a prayer service to bless those who have died trying to reach Europe. Part of the famed Notre Dame Cathedral has finally opened to the public. The Paris Cathedral's crypt, which had been spared from the 2019 Holy Week fire, can now have visitors. They can expect to see an exhibition of 2 famous figures connected to the cathedral, author Victor Hugo and the very architect who built the church's spire. The crypt opened its doors after being painstakingly cleaned of toxic lead dust. The rest of Notre Dame is currently off limits to the public. Some good news on those deadly wildfires on the West Coast. Churches there are stepping in to help. The Diocese of Portland is reporting that most of their churches are not harmed and have even offered shelter to thousands of evacuees, filling their parish gyms and parking lots. Any parishes that were close to the flames were evacuated. Despite the help, California, Washington, and Oregon are in a fight against hellish infernos. The deadly fires have destroyed hundreds of homes and millions of acres burned. And just as officials are getting closer to containing the flames, new ones have ignited. Whitney Wild has the story.
Wildfires raging in California, Oregon, and Washington state turned from destructive.
And within minutes, our house went up in flames and nothing left.
To deadly.
We also fear that this is not going to be the only folks that we find deceased.
At least 7 people died after fires ripped through communities, leaving little but ash behind.
Probably most of them were running for their lives.
In California, at least 14,000 firefighters are battling roughly 28 fires under eerie red skies that look like movie depictions of Mars.
I'm sprinkling basically drops of water on my house trying to save it while this extremely crazy intense inferno is devouring everything around me.
Nearly 50 wildfires blaze in Oregon, charring more than 470,000 acres. The governor there says these are the worst fire conditions in the last 3 decades.
It was the scariest thing I've ever had happen to me in my entire life.
In some parts of Washington state, residents head back home to dig through rubble and test their strength.
Everything that we own over the past 20 years, gone.
I'm Whitney Wild reporting.
The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, spoke about the devastation in her home state of California and said she's praying for the first responders.
Our thoughts and prayers, of course, are with our firefighters who are so courageous. We've already lost one in this fight, and we also lost a 1-year-old boy among the 15 dead in these fires.
Pelosi says she's been getting calls from her family and constituents about how dark the sky is all day because of the fires. Vice President Mike Pence spent the day in Pennsylvania. He spoke at a pro-life event at the Cornerstone Ministries Church in Murraysville. He said elections are about choices, and the choice is clear when it comes to life and religious liberty that President Trump stands for the right to life. Pence also said he's convinced before the year is over, we will have the first safe and effective coronavirus vaccine. Still to come on Currents News, make a wish and hang it on a tree. How doing that is planting the seeds of peace in one community when we come back. Finally tonight, in a small neighborhood in Virginia, on a street lined with trees, you'll find an amazing sight. It's a large cedar with little paper and fabric tags strung between its branches, a wishing tree. Chelsea Donovan reports from Norfolk.
Situated on the median of a West Ghent neighborhood, hundreds of tags flutter from a sprawling cedar tree.
Brings me to my knees when I think about some of the raw honesty that people are willing to share.
The concept is known as a wishing tree, started by Suzanne Sherman in 2016, who would rather not have the attention on her, but here on these hopes, pleas, and dreams.
We were driving through a neighborhood in LA and we just stumbled across this tree in a neighborhood, and I was just struck by its organic beauty. You know, it was stunning.
Sherman said the tree and its messages brought her peace, so she brought the idea 3,000 miles here to Norfolk.
The terrorist attack in Paris happened, and then the attack on the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, and then yet another attack in France. I was becoming overwhelmed with the violence, the way our world was becoming, and I knew it wasn't just me.
Her idea quickly took off.
The next day, there were 2 or 3 wishes, and then the next day there were more, and it just sort of happened. I just wanted people to have a place to put their thoughts.
Many of the original wishes hang tattered, weathered from the years, but beneath the branches, rebirth, many scrawling their thoughts from the pandemic to protests.
It brings out empathy. It makes us understand other people's wishes, struggles. And I think empathy is something that right now we need more than ever. And we all want some of the same things, which is love, peace, kindness. It's very simple. And I hope it continues as long as people want it to or need it to.
It's good to have a bit of hope now and then. That was Chelsea Donovan reporting. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.